Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Madden Benz Unfiltered, brought to you by Rush to Crush. Hey, less than a month to go before the big bike ride. It's on May the 19th. Rush to Crush Cancer. The bike ride's set to get going. Register at rushtocrushcancer.org and help us in the fight against cancer. Join the ride. They just had a big event yesterday to get funds going and to get promotion going for the event. Be a part of it at rushtocrushcancer.org. Tim Benz, Mark Madden with you. Mark, of course, on 3 until 6, Monday through Friday on 105.9 The X. I'll actually be in for Mark on the X on Friday after round 1 of the NFL draft, which we'll get to momentarily. But, Mark, this is the first time we've spoken here since the Penguin season has ended. Your overall thoughts on how it came to end and what Kyle Dubas and some of the players said afterwards.
It went exactly like I thought it would. I thought they'd be borderline in or borderline out. As it turned out, they were borderline out. I was kind of surprised at how the league and the conference went down around the Penguins. You look at a lot of teams that were supposed to take a jump up, like Detroit and Ottawa and Buffalo. None of them did. And New Jersey was supposed to be, I don't want to say a power, but much better than they turned out. But the Penguins finished about where I thought they would. In terms of the aftermath, Dubas isn't going to give away his offseason plan to the media. He's not going to be too critical of players either. I was surprised he was as critical as he was of Ryan Graves and Erik Karlsson, and that he really did come down relatively hard on that period surrounding the Gensel trade, where the team, quite frankly, quit. It went into the tank because they were so sad their little buddy was being traded. Lars Eller talked about that too. It was good Lars Eller talked about it, and Dubas too. Because if you've been around that locker room for years, what happened around the Gensel trade might seem normal. Whereas, like, you looked at Eller, not just what he said, but when he talked about it, here we are weeks later, he was still in obvious disbelief that happened.
Yeah, he seemed pained by it and didn't want to admit it. I think he was kind of hoping that people would draw the inference when he made the comments about them being in lulls for too long and too low. And when I asked him directly about Gensel, he knew he had to answer. And it lended credibility to something those of us in the media have been saying for a long time, that they were too low for way too long after that. And, the real kick in the teeth, Mark, and I think this is part of the reason why Dubas was as patently upset about it and plain as day upset about it, is Bunting ended up being better than what a lot of people expect. Bunting started to work out and maybe even helped them a little bit. But they were in such
made Malkin much better. Bunting made Malkin play north to south. So you not only brought in a player who contributed in his own right, but he made one of your stars who had been in the doldrums all year play much better.
Karlsson, Jari, Sullivan, those three have gotten a lot of criticism, but they're all back next year, right? None of them will be gone.
You can't get rid of Karlsson. I think Jari would be hard to move, and I don't think they'll be inclined to do so until they're 100% sure that Blomqvist is ready to step up.
Yeah, Blomqvist being paired with Jari to me isn't the worst thing in the world, theoretically.
Well, now that depends. That depends. Do you want him to get number one workload in Wilkes or be a much-used backup here? And if so much used, how much used? You'd have to really ask Sullivan about that before you even made a decision in goal, because you know how Sully likes veterans, although I think he is out of love with Jari at this point.
That's the difference, yeah.
What if you made Blomqvist the backup and he played 20 games only?
I think sometimes as a goalie, you got to deal with that. You don't get the natural progression as much as maybe a skater does in that situation.
Yeah, but they need to get it right with him.
Well, if that's the case, though, I mean, like, they still have 3 years after this year with Jari, so he's going to have to go through that at some point, right? Unless they figure out a way to move Jari next year.
If Blomqvist becomes the number one while Jari's still here, you just have a highly paid backup for a while.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Because Blomqvist won't be making a ton right away when he, comes into the league and with the Penguins. So, yeah, I think the goaltending situation is confusing now, but if Blomqvist develops, will easily sort itself out. I want to get back to the Gensel thing and indeed the Vegas vacation thing. It's a soft organization right now. It is way too much of a get-along gang. where stuff like, the feels matter. Like the Jeff Carter thing after the last game. Okay, yeah. I don't begrudge him being honored for a pretty good career, and that's all it was pretty good. But you're having an on-ice celebration after you didn't make the playoffs. I'm sorry, that's a bad look. I don't care if Jeff Carter was a lot better than he really is. It's a bad look.
Back to the Vegas vacation thing, Mark. If there is a player on the roster who is Nick Papagiorgio with the Penguins, who is it?
Well, I don't know that Nick Papagiorgio ever got, blind drunk. Like, well, put it this way.
Well, hold on. He wound up in the hot tub, though, didn't he?
Nick Papagiorgio never missed practice the next day.
Fair point. Fair point. I do like the Nick Cage analogy. I actually used a GIF from Nick Cage in our Madden Monday write-up after the podcast, after you made that reference. The one where he's going down the aisles and grabbing all the liquor before he heads out from California to Vegas.
Yeah, that was like the Penguins as soon as they got to Vegas.
So
you get what I mean, Tim, that it's a soft organization, that things matter too much that don't matter. As I've repeated often, I said to a member of the 91 and 92 Stanley Cup champs that the locker room was upset about the Gensel trade. And he said, we traded Rex and Koff. Tell him to get over it.
Yeah, Recky Coffey, John Cullen, too, comes to mind.
Well, yeah, that's even a better example because in 91, they traded Cullen to Hartford in the Ron Francis trade, which might have been the turning point in the Penguins franchise aside from drafting Lemieux. That and getting Coffey when they did from Edmonton. And Cully was arguably the most popular guy in that room.
Right.
And the Jake thing, the reaction was partially based on his quality, but it was based on him being their buddy more than that, which is absurd.
Well, two, they also didn't know what it was like to go through something like this. They've never been a seller before. The group of Penguins that was in that locker room has never been in a position where they've sold before. And I think they felt insulted by it. But back to the point you made on the podcast, in a strange twist of irony, given how they ended up performing, winning 8 of their last 12, it was those actions that actually flew the flag on the season, the white flag on the season, more so than the trade itself.
Well, they believe too much in the unbreakable bond of hockey's brotherhood. I'll give you an example. Jason Zucker was here for a couple years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically did nothing but get hurt. When he returned to the team with Arizona, I think he went from here to Arizona. I saw him in the hall afterwards. They were like leaping into his arms. I mean, it's hockey, for heaven's sakes. Like we always hear about the friendship between Sid and Gino, which has been, written about, talked about, right? Tim, how many times do you think they'll see each other ever again after they're both done playing in the NHL? How many times?
Well, I don't know. Does Sid have a beach house in Magnitogorsk like he has a lake house in Nova Scotia?
Sid ain't going to Russia. Gino ain't coming back here except for like Hockey Hall of Fame, stuff like that. So I would put the over and under at 5. Maybe.
Penguins fans, make your comments now. The season is done. The offseason is looming, and I don't see a lot of activity for the Penguins. I especially don't see activity on the coaching staff, except for maybe Todd Reirden getting changed out. Although, I mean,
which will be such a token scapegoating move. Yeah. And I'm not saying you don't got to do it, but he ain't the problem. Not with the power play, not with anything.
I did like Kyle Dubas's slap pass comment about Erik Karlsson. That was probably about 3 months overdue, but I'm glad I heard it eventually anyway.
Instead of Dubas talking to the media after the season, we should have just taped his comments in the GM's box during games. It is delightful.
They need to move him away from us because eventually he's going to say something that somebody's going to report it, even though it's off the record.
They need to get me and him on mic, Tim. Would be a solid between periods act.
Yeah, there was that clip, remember when he was in Toronto where he threw the water bottle and he got upset with fans? Thankfully, he's far enough away from the fans at the setup at PPG where that could never happen.
Well, Tim, they built the wall up in the GM's box. So it's not as easy for us to look back and see in. If you look at the wall in the GM's box, the front wall is higher than all the other boxes.
And at the Steelers at Acrisure Stadium, they didn't rebuild it or build it high or anything like that. What they did was they eventually put a black curtain so people could stop seeing how Kevin Colbert was reacting in game all the time.
in the first game of the season, because I was ready for the power play to suck. One thing we have to give me credit for, Tim, I knew how bad the power play would be. I wrote it, I said it, and then we lived it. So the first game of the season, like 2 power plays in, I was like slapping my palm on the press box counter and screaming expletives. The second game, I hear Dubas doing the same thing almost word for word. And I look down at the press box and say, he got that from me.
All right, so Penguins fans, we want to hear from you. Let's get to the Steelers. Let's get to the draft. It's coming up on Thursday. I've frequently said, Mark, that for as interesting as this draft may be, I'm also, from like a columnist and talk show host point of view, not that interested because I don't feel like I can rip them for just about anything. Like if they go corner, go corner. If they go tackle or center, go tackle or center. If they get even a defensive lineman, I wouldn't be put off by it. Wide receiver, for sure, I would be embracing of that. But now
I'll go one step further. I think they need to draft a receiver. I think that's the number one priority, given their shortage there and given the way the league is.
Okay,
I think they can get by with what they have an offensive line. There's no way they can get by without drastically improving their receiving core.
So Matt Williamson, who you have on your show, he's part of our pre-draft podcast annually all the time. I've got those up at Trib Live. Let me just throw this at you to play devil's advocate a little bit. He said the top 3 is great. He said the top 3 of these wide receivers might be Ben, Eli, and Rivers for wide receivers in 2004. That draft, that's how good they are. But the Steelers aren't going to get those guys. And then there's like a dip where there's a bunch of everybody else that's going to be really good if you get them at 20 or you get them at 51. Like literally the next 25 picks could be wide receiver.
It's kind of like Torrey Holt, David Boston, and then you drop all the way to Troy Edwards, who the Steelers picked, I believe, in 1999.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, we can argue about how good David Boston was.
He wasn't good. Yeah, so, okay, I see what you're saying and what Matt's saying. Maybe you wait second round to get that receiver, but they got to get a receiver first 2 picks, no question.
Yeah, first 2 for sure. I would say get or make a trade for one. You know, trade a pick and try to get one of these guys that are out there. I think Courtland Sutton makes the most sense, even if he's not as much of a big name as Ayuk or Higgins, but I would love to see them get a veteran receiver. Not only do they need it from a football standpoint, Mark, we need it from a George Pickens standpoint. It's best for our business if that happens.
Well, let me tell you, George Pickens is going to be a major problem. I think this is the year he goes double live gonzo. Okay? I think he's going to be as bad as AB without the performance of AB. I don't think he's matured. You tell me, Tim. Have you seen any evidence he's matured even one little bit during his time here?
No. I mean, I have not. And I don't think that bringing in a veteran receiver who he would perceive to be as a challenge to his perception that he's a number 1 already would aid.
Or drafting one. Or you can't add any receiver unless it's Tyler Boyd that he won't get mad about.
If they were to draft a pure slot guy with the second pick or the first pick, that might be the one thing that doesn't set him off. But that's not who Ayuk is. That's not who Sutton is. That's not who T. Higgins is.
They're not getting Ayuk. I could see them. I mentioned Tyler Boyd. I could see them signing Tyler Boyd and conning themselves that he could be a number 2 here.
Yeah, well, more like they could, if they were to figure out a way to get Boyd under contract, make him a number 3, and the rookie, who's the second rounder, is the number 2, and then Pickens is the number 1.
I still don't think that's good enough.
No, it might not be. I mean, it depends how good the rookie is.
I think Freiermuth stinks, okay? You look at his stats, he doesn't block. If you couldn't yell Muth, everyone would hate him. He stinks.
Well, if he was Travis Kelce, Russell Wilson still might not be able to see him over the middle of the field. Muth might be moot. That's the thing. They might be moot. Moot. What did Cowher say? A mute point? It was a mute point?
Yeah, I just think that's – I don't think they see the problem that I do with the receiving core, including tight end.
Well, listen, where I was going with the thought anyway, Mark, was for a long time I didn't think they could make a wrong pick. All of a sudden now I've worked myself into a lather over if they do pick Mims, the tackle from Georgia, because if they're picking Mims, I know they're picking him for next year, and they're going to have Dan Moore be the intended starter for the next 17 games.
Don't you think that's a likely pick?
I could very easily say it. I could especially see it happening now because, like, when I see something like what the Tampa Bay GM said, Jason Light, when he said that he was willing to trade down maybe once the picks got to 20, ding, 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 AFC partner, AFC North partner. Let's make a deal here. Steelers go down a few. Mims is still on the board. One of the centers is still on the board. Guyton is still on the board. Like, in theory, I don't have a problem with him trading down. But for Mims, if a lot of people are saying he's a good player, he's just not going to play for us this year, and he's still there, the Steelers will absolutely take him because they're fine with Moore starting opposite Broderick Jones. Then that just delays Jones's move to left tackle even more.
Which is stupid, but it might happen. But they like a good story, as we know, Tim, like Kenny Pickett just switching parking lots. And Mims and Jones, the Georgia guys, bookend tackles. Coach T would like that.
And he's huge. I mean, like, he is something like 6'8", 340. I bet you he turns out.
Tim, they would be, you alluded to this, maybe even hit the nail on the head, and I didn't quite get it. They would be picking him because they want to play Moore another year. They love Moore. Even though every single metric compiled by every single person who compiles metrics says that he stinks, they love him.
Yeah, they're going to love him until they have to pay him a second contract. Then they'll let somebody else do that.
Or they'll keep him at a lower price for, like, I think he'd be a good backup across the line.
Well, he would, but the problem is he's a swing tackle who can't swing. He can't play the other side. He can only play the left side.
Matt Williamson says he'd be awful at right tackle.
I agree, and I think Moore has sort of intimated that. Tomlin has basically said that he's not good on the right side. So, I don't know. I love the player.
This team ain't that good. People think it improved a lot this offseason. It did not. It didn't improve enough.
Mims would have been a really good guy to get 4 years ago when they had that veteran offensive line intact and they were looking for an heir apparent to Villanueva. Like, that's when you get Mims, when you have two other starters at tackle hammered in there.
Their approach is still so outdated. I keep coming back to this. The idea of possessing the ball, which they're going to do with Arthur Smith, pound it on the ground and play good defense and keep the other team off the field, the other team's offense. Okay, that beats bad teams. That beats the lesser of the NFL's rosters. It doesn't beat great quarterbacks because the situation they'll find themselves in and have before, you have a 9-minute drive for a field goal. Joe Burrow has a 2-minute drive for a touchdown. The great quarterbacks don't need the ball that much, and they're not going to beat great quarterbacks with that approach. Then again, I'm not sure they'd beat great quarterbacks with any approach given who they have at quarterback.
Well, Mark, here's the good news. Russell Wilson's first throw in Pittsburgh was a strike. The bad news is Derek Shelton came out and pulled him immediately after.
Yeah, he was on a pitch count of 1.
Justin Fields, get him ready.
Yeah.
Then Fields went on the mound and fumbled the ball like Cueto.
The Pirates going 2-9 after starting 9-2 and now losing 6 straight and hardly scoring any runs. I mean, they are what they are. 11-11, that ain't bad for their team, but they're not going to be good teams. They don't have the bats to hit good pitchers. They just are exactly what they, not as bad as they've looked lately, but they're 11-11, and that's not surprising. But the over celebration when they were 9-2, yeah, it makes me kind of clap back a little bit right now.
Well, I love Ben Cherington's response on the flagship station yesterday when he was asked about the decision to pull Jones, and he said words to the effect of, "We're trying to win the small battles as well as the war." Well, the problem is you lost the small battle, and you haven't won a war since 1992.
I'm not even sure what that means, and I would bet he doesn't either.
Did Sherman on his march to the sea stop between Atlanta and Savannah halfway through and call it a day? I mean, like, what war are we talking about here?
I think he might have stopped for some water. I don't know. I'm watching Manhunt right now. I'm trying to come up with a wittier reference than that.
Oh, I'll give you not a spoiler alert, but I will tell you Sherman does make an appearance later in the show, Mark. Be ready for that.
I thought you were going to say he makes it to Atlanta. I know that. It's like I know they caught Booth too, Tim. That doesn't mean it's a bad watch.
Spoiler alert.
No, there are some things about the Pirates. Their developmental is a joke, obviously. And look at Henry Davis. O'Neal Cruz doesn't know how to play baseball, Tim. He does not know how to play baseball. He's a great raw talent. Look at the strikeouts. Look at the errors. Look at the uncomfortable way he looks at the plate. He doesn't know how to play baseball. You know who's not that good either? Ryan Reynolds isn't that good. I mean, I used to think that contract was too much for him. Excuse me. He gave them a little bit of a break. It wasn't enough.
He's overpaid.
He's an average player. He's a slightly above average baseball player. That's all he is. And they kept him because they could.
Yeah, it's a similar thing with Cabrian Hayes. So we'll see how he does the rest of the year, too. I mean, it hasn't gotten off to a great start for me either. Well, here's the good news, Mark. Now the Brewers come to town, and the Brewers are one of the best teams in baseball so far this year.
Well, Cabrian Hayes will never be worth that contract, but his offense is getting a little better. But he's made, 3 errors already, right?
Yeah, it hasn't been great for him in the field so far.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be his calling card.
I'm really interested to see what happens with Jones tonight and when Skeens comes up. I mean, Skeens, they're at least giving him a few more pitches. I don't know if that was on a pitch count or an innings count.
Not many more.
Like 15.
Last outing.
Yeah.
I don't see with Jones and Skeens. First off, one thing about Jones. In his 3 prior starts, he threw over 80 pitches. So cutting him way back, I don't get. An innings count, there's no such thing as an innings count. When I heard Shelty say that, I'm thinking, okay, you made that up right now. I don't know what they're preparing these guys for. Okay, to have Skeens on a workload that's much, much lighter than it was when he pitched at LSU. What are they preparing him for?
The march to the river. Sherman's march to the river, I guess. I don't know. I mean, in listening to them talk about it, well, here's the thing that they haven't said.
Let's get it right.
No, I know, but I'm saying they've got a river. There is no sea. We're not Savannah. We don't have a beach. All we've got is a riverfront, so that's the closest we could get to. No, but where I get confused, and no one's been able to properly explain this to me, is the over-reliance then on lesser pitchers in the bullpen. Because the innings have to be covered by somebody. There's still 27 outs you got to get 162 nights a year. So whether they're easy outs, hard outs, high leverage, low leverage, at some point you're turning it over to lesser bullpen pitchers way too often.
Well, Tim, that's because they don't prioritize winning. As simple as that. Okay, they prioritize doing things the preconceived way they've laid out. And they're not going to swivel or pivot to try and win more. They're just not.
To that point, look at what the Dodgers did last night with Mr. Arm Injury himself, Tyler Glasnow. It's 10-0, and they had him pitch 8 innings, striking out 10, shut out baseball, and just kept letting him go. Just kept trotting him out there because they're in first place or close to it. I don't know if they're in first right now.
And they're just tired of him anyway.
Who, Glasnow?
Yeah, everybody is. I am. He's had so many arm injuries. Screw it. What's one more? Just pitch, kid.
All right, here's Josh. He says, what context does Sullivan need to be given to do anything different from this year? Based on after-season pressers, I agree with Mark. I don't see anything drastically changing. In fact, I see the problem getting worse. They got a little worse this year. Dropped a few more points and one more slot in the standings.
Yep, no question. Probably be a little worse next year, too. Although, wait, I don't know. I mean, Dubas will have – this will be his second offseason, which is significant. He spent last offseason undoing some problems. He'll have a bit more cap space. I don't know. It might be a slightly better team, but not better enough.
Eric, as I said, after they started 9-2, the real Pirates will show up. Ergo, my excitement was tempered. This team sucks, and as always, so long as the hillbilly runs the show, how can so many dopey fans actually rave about this team when it starts well? I don't know who was raving. I think everybody had guarded optimism at most.
Oh, no. I think there was some raving at 9-2.
Yeah?
Yeah.
See, I think yet again they got some inflated results because they got better than expected starting pitching. For the second straight year, April started with the starting pitchers doing better than expected, and then, well, everything else. And then the offense, too. I mean, the offense has just collapsed. How many times have they had just one run in the last 6 games? Like 5 of the last 6 or something like that?
No, 4. 4 times
in
the last 6.
Joe Homer. That's right. Yeah.
They've only scored 9 runs total, I think, in the last 6 games.
Yeah, something like that. Jeff
says, it's like Fez once said to Jackie about Kelso, Tim, regarding the Pirates fans. Jackie, he loves you. He's just stupid.
Jeff says, when the Penguins lost Recchi and Cullen, they were young and hungry. Now they are satisfied and over the hill. Besides Sid, I don't think they have the same desire to win.
See, this guy, everybody wants to think you can desire yourself into being better. Desire and coaching, well, just want it more. Just coach them up. This team just isn't very good. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that they're fat and happy, like, Letang and Malkin and anybody else who's been around for a while, but like Brian Rust has won cups. He's still trying hard. There's just only so much you can
Well,
do.
now, I'll give you an example, okay? Let's say they hadn't mentally tanked around the Gensel trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say during that period they go 5-4. No, 4-4 instead of 1-7, right?
They're in.
And that gets them in the playoffs. They weren't going to win the cup. We're talking about making the playoffs, playing a series, losing in the first round again, like you have every year when you've made it since 2019. That's what we're talking about here.
Bill says, if Jari gets moved, and that's a big if, would you re-sign Ned and have him split time with Bloomquist next year?
No, I'm not re-signing Ned. I'm looking for somebody different. He didn't play that good. His run at the end has become horribly overrated. He's just a journeyman goalie at the right price, maybe, but I don't pay him 1 cent more than what it would take to get somebody comparable to keep Ned here.
Yeah, I mean, they won a lot of games with 6 and 5 goals on the board with Ned getting that point streak. I mean, you look at his numbers, his save percentage for the streak was, I think it was not the streak. I take that back. His save percentage from the Colorado game to the end of the season against the Islanders was like .893.
Which is bad.
Yeah, his numbers were a little bit worse during the last 13 games than Jari's were for the season.
Right. So what's the point? I mean, we glamorized it. Like we do everything that's a little ray of sunshine with every team in Pittsburgh.
Better story than it was a performance is probably the best way to say it.
He's a ham and egg. I don't mean to put him down, but, he's not a number one. Not close.
Now, that said, though, Mark, I mean, like the profile that he cuts, though, is one that does allow them and force them, though, to go with Bloomquist, so it's developmental, and at the same time, he's not wasting starts like you intimated he might be doing if he gets called up and only plays 20 games.
What you mean if you went with Ned and Bloomquist?
Well, a Ned type, that type of compliment.
Yeah, but Jari's going to be here next year, so that's moot or mute if you're Bill Connell.
David says Hayes isn't hitting all that great anymore either. I believe 260-ish with 0 home runs. He needs more time with the minor league hitting instructor, I'm thinking. Oh, yeah, that was his guy, right? Didn't he hire him? He hired him full time, too, once they let him go, correct?
That hasn't been talked about lately, but that I think that was said, yeah. He's never going to be a power guy. That's why he won't justify the contract.
Ron says Shelty should have been fired 3 years ago. Well, sure. What, to bring in
somebody?
What
good would that do? What good would that do?
To bring in somebody else just to listen to what Ben Cherington wanted? Like, how about Ben Cherington yesterday saying that was the staff's decision? It might have been their decision, but it was within the parameters of what's been set up by the organization. Give me a break. You're trying to, slough this off on the manager now? Like, why do you think they did it? Because you've told them to be paranoid about pitch counts. That's why.
I don't pay attention to one word Ben Cherington says because his primary concern is saving the club money. I don't pay attention to one word Derek Shelton says because he manages by rote. He may as well be reading from that book, Baseball for Dummies.
Lastly, Mark Richard says, Dubas, a lot of responses here. Let me get this one. Dubas says, he should Sullivan-proof the roster by trying to move and not sign fringe veterans, which would force Sullivan to use younger players as he wouldn't have another choice. In other words, don't get the next versions of Achari, Nieto, Graves, whoever else they decide to bring in.
I don't disagree with that, but that's easier said than done. That's a tall order. It reminds me of when Ray Shiro traded a winger named Michel Ouellette, because Mike Carrion was going to play him no matter what.
Yeah, so that was sort of a Billy Bean move at the time. I can't remember what came first, the movie or that trade, but it was essentially the same thing in a different sport.
I think that happens more than you think.
Well, I believe it. And
also, one thing as well about trades like that, the concept of the GM telling the coach what to do occasionally has been lost. Saying you're not deploying the roster as it's assembled to do. Nobody does that anymore. I think it'd be better if GMs did that once in a while because the GM is in charge. The idea that the coach has autonomy is a dumb thing, but it's come to pass.
Finally, Mark, Aerosmith coming back. That was announced since we last spoke.
Yeah, I have tickets for 5 shows. That might be too many. I might have to dump one.
I know I'm on Friday for you. Going to Motley Crue in Atlantic City. Is that where you're going?
No, this weekend?
This weekend, yeah.
No, this weekend I'm running my annual ball hockey tournament, which, by the way, this Southwest Florida Ball Hockey League does not have a team in, so screw them. Get them out of the comments.
Oh, the guys to the bottom?
Yeah, and then the next week I'm taking Thursday and Friday off.
Where are you going then?
To Motley in Atlantic City.
Okay, that's the Atlantic City one. All right, gotcha.
And then the week after that, Stones in Vegas.
There you go. I love that video with Sydney Sweeney for Angry. I like that song. I'm not the world's biggest Stones fan. I actually like a few songs of that album, including that one, and probably because the video was Sydney Sweeney. I'm not going to lie.
I got caught betwixt in between this summer because I bought tickets for the Stones in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And then Robert Plant announced for Star Lake the same day.
With Alison Krauss?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Stones. I mean,
that's a good call.
I've seen Robert and Allison twice, and it's real good, but I would prefer the Stones.
Hey, we're under a month to go.
That'll be the day Jimmy Page shows up.
Oh, well, then I would be jealous. Yeah, if Jimmy Page decided to show up at Star Lake, that would be newsworthy unto itself.
When did I see? I saw him with. I think Jimmy only played Star Lake once, and I think it was with Black Crows. Black Crows with Jimmy Page.
Oh, yes. You know, you're right. You're right. That did happen. You're right about that.
That was great.
Yeah, that was a good one. I remember that one pretty well, actually. All right, Rush to Crush, more than a bike ride. It's a mission. Join us May 19th for the Rush to Crush Cancer Bike Ride. To register, go to rushtocrushcancer.org. Less than a month to go before the ride. Help us in the fight against cancer. Join the ride.